Good evening and welcome to the Miracle of Prosperity. I am Reverend Jim Webb, Senior Minister of the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel in Silver Spring, Maryland, and the author of the book, The Soul of Prosperity. Now, we know prosperity as a multidimensional concept. We know it not just as money and stuff. We know prosperity as relationship prosperity, where we have harmonious, supportive relationships with friends. We also know prosperity as professional prosperity, where we have a wonderful job with wonderful pay, where we provide a wonderful service in a wonderful way, according to Florence Scovel. We know prosperity as spiritual prosperity, where we experience the peace that passes all understanding. So there are so many ways that we can experience prosperity, and they're all hiding in plain sight. Our task is to remove any barriers to the prosperity that is as natural as breathing, and that is God's will for us. So each Sunday evening, we get together and we either remove a barrier to our prosperity, or we develop a technique to allow and attract even more of that prosperity. And tonight is no exception. But I want to start tonight a little differently. I want to start tonight with a couple of case studies, because I counsel and I coach and I do intuitive support work for people. And I've literally worked with thousands of clients over the last 30 years. And some of the truths that I espouse in my book, The Soul of Prosperity, have been developed as a result of that experience in my intuitive work with people. So I want to share with you a couple of stories that outline what we're going to discuss tonight. The first is a story about a friend of mine. She was a fly girl. Yeah, she was a fly girl, but she was also an airline attendant. And she worked for a company headquartered in Atlanta. She was from New York. We knew each other from our New York school club. And in New York, she met a pilot who was stationed in Atlanta. They had a wonderful relationship. But the relationship had to take its next steps. So he asked her to move to Atlanta to this fabulous house he had built. And she did. And so she moved to Atlanta, letting go of her apartment in New York and all of that. And she was still a little insecure because I had known of her past. And in her past, she hadn't had good relationships with men. They'd either betray her in one way or another, and she was often disappointed and didn't trust that a man could love her the way she deserved to be. So we said our tearful kiss goodbyes, and she moved down to Atlanta. And so about a couple weeks later, they used to walk around the reservoir. There was a reservoir around their development. They would walk around the reservoir. And so on one Sunday morning, he said, "Well, why don't you go to walking around the reservoir alone?" And she said, "Well, why don't you come with me?" And he said, "You just go. I'll be here and I'll hang. You just go." And all of a sudden, all her old tapes kicked in. All of a sudden, she thought, uh-oh, here it comes. Like that old Roberta Flack song, "Look out, here it comes. I know a goodbye when I hear one." She thought the goodbye was imminent. She thought the betrayal was imminent. She thought her pain that she had had from the past was going to resurface. She thought that it was imminent. So she walked around the reservoir, and the sky got as cloudy as her demeanor as she walked around the reservoir. She started projecting forward all the worst. And so she projected all the worst forward to the degree that she was convinced that when she got back to that beautiful house, she was going to find her luggage on the front stoop and the locks changed. So she walked around the reservoir not once, not twice, but 3 times. And by the time she came back to the house, she walked in the door, and the house was full of people, and the house was full of surprise. He had invited all of his friends to a surprise welcome shower for her, at which point he proposed to her. And she thought to herself, now I let my old wounds from my past ruin an hour of my life that I'll never get back. Because I was, as A Course in Miracles in the early lessons 1 through 20 say, I see only the past and I am seeing something that wasn't there. She was projecting her past instead of allowing grace in her. She wasted an hour of her life in pain when she could have been in joy because of her old wounds. But not only can an old wound ruin an hour, an old wound can ruin a life. So let me tell you another story. This is a story about a client who asked her husband for a divorce and got a settlement. Shouldn't have added that part. She asked her husband for a divorce, and so I asked, well, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? And she said, we were on our way somewhere, and I gently, lovingly said, perhaps we should turn left here. And she said, I saw the Hydra. I saw his anger. I saw his pain. I saw his rage, and he raged at me, and he abused me, and this was not the first time, but this was the last time. And suddenly, he became not the man she had married or the loving husband whose rages she had endured. She suddenly saw once again that he was the 7-year-old boy whose father had abused him, called him names, and hurt him physically for bringing back the wrong tool from the tool shed. In other words, the wounds he carried bled all over her. She didn't cut him to the point where she couldn't take it anymore. His old wounds ruined his marriage, ruined his life. So the question I asked in the teaser to the show, can our wounds block our prosperity? The answer is an obvious yes. And that's what we're going to discuss tonight. And when I say we, I have invited on our show tonight an esteemed friend, Brother Henry Harris, who's author of the book, Facing Our Wounds. Welcome, Brother Henry Harris.
Thank you so much. And I want to extend my gratitude for this invitation.
Well, I am so glad you're here, and I am so honored you're here. And in full disclosure to our guests, I was a guest on Brother Henry's show as well. His book, Facing Our Wounds, really attracted to him, his ministry, his wisdom, and all that he is doing. It's obviously available on Amazon. But I was a guest on his show as well. And I heard a wonderful prosperity story from him on his show. When he started his show, people said he would fail. When he started his show, people said he would never get guests. But his show thrived. And his show had so many luminaries, so many, I can't even name them all, but one of the names that stuck out in my mind was Maya Angelou. She came on his show while she was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells you of the power of yes. So I take my hat off to you for your persistence. I take my hat off to you for your faith in yourself when no one else had faith in you. I take my hat off to you as living spirit.
Thank you
So,
so much.
yeah. So I love your book, Facing Our Wounds, because the essence of it is that if we don't face our wounds will sabotage them.
Hmm.
Tell me what caused you to write this book?
Uh, Once again, Reverend Jim, thank you so much for this invitation. I've been looking forward to this with such anticipation. And I would say what inspired me to write this book is that I feel like as human beings, we are a wounded people. I mean, um, wounds and being hurt and traumatized, trauma is a universal, all of it is a universal language. Just like love is a universal language. It's something that we've all experienced, something that we've all deal with. And knowing that there are many people out there that are suffering and that are hurting in some capacity, whether may be aware of it or not, I feel like there was something on the inside of me that could contribute to that by means of helping people. I'm not a therapist or anything like that, but after reading the book, many people thought a therapist wrote it because I guess because of the certain language that I use. However, several therapists have purchased my book, and one of my friends who's a therapist highly recommended her book. Actually, she bought several copies for her patients and told me that they had greatly benefited from the book. So I was saying knowing that a lot of people are suffering in some areas in their lives and facing their wounds, which can be a challenge, by the way. I feel like that's what encouraged me to write that book, facing our wounds.
So you believe it can help people to mitigate, minimize, or end suffering that stands between them and their.
Yes, I do, and the reason why I believe that is because I don't know anyone else experience, but I do. I do love that scripture that talks about that it's God's will for us to prosper, even as our soul prosper. It kind of goes with the title of your book, and I feel like each individual should reach a place in their life in asking themselves, "Am I truly prospering in my life?" And
Mhm.
I'm not just talking about spiritual things or physical things. It could be a variety of things. I feel like we can prosper in every arena, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And if we're not prospering, I think it's important to ask ourselves, why am I not growing? Why am I not blossoming? In my own experience, uh, I had a history of suppressing my emotions,
Mhm.
suppressing my feelings.
Yes.
And the reason why I did that because I had some hidden secrets and some things in my life that was detrimental to me that I didn't
Mhm.
want to open up and deal with and talk about everything from childhood trauma on up. That was my shack, so to speak. I didn't let nobody in there.
Yes.
I didn't allow anybody into that sacred space. But while that was my comfort, and I kind of mentioned that in my book. While that was, I could in my book I call that my home.
Yes.
Why I didn't let nobody into that part of my life was because I didn't want to expose that. Uh, William Paul Young, the author of The Shack, many of you probably know him. He's a good friend of mine. He wrote, "The unexposed is the unhealed."
Mm.
And when I first heard that, I said, "Wow, that's profound. What does that actually mean?" And that set me free in the sense
Mhm.
to prosper in every aspect
Mhm.
of my life. But I knew that as long as I kept holding on to those old wounds of the past, that I would reach a state of stagnation.
Yes. So, in other words, holding on to old wounds, living in your own personal house of pain can block your prosperity, inhibit your growth, and halt your happiness. Is
Yes,
that what
sir.
I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. That's what you're hearing.
Okay. So, what are some of the things that you would suggest that would enable us to move forward in facing our?
If you read the title of the book, it's I would say it's challenging.
Mhm.
And I say this and I'm laughing at myself because the opposite of facing our wounds is what? Is to bury it or to hide it or pretend like it doesn't exist or it didn't happen. I always tell people you have to face your wounds. Even the healing process never starts until you acknowledge what happened to you.
Mm.
I'm not going to go into, I mean, those that are watching, you probably know some personal traumatic experiences you've had in
Mhm.
the past. And that's what I had to do. I was like, face my wounds. I spent all these years covering it up.
Mm.
Didn't want nobody to know about it. I didn't want to go to a therapist. I didn't want to discuss it with no one. But I tell you, it's very liberating when you actually can sit down with someone. First of all, being honest with yourself.
Mhm.
Your question, I would say acknowledging it. And acknowledging it just simply means calling it out for what it is. This is what I'm struggling. It may be a struggle for some people. This is what I was traumatized by. But secondly, not being in denial about it.
Yes.
As I quoted in my book, uh, in the I forgot what chapter it was, the state of denial. Many people are in denial about the trauma that they experience, and a lot of that comes from shame. Um,
Yes.
maybe some that they did. And I often tell
Yes.
people that guilt, we feel guilty because of something that we did, but and then some. Then I also say some people have convinced themselves that shame is who they are,
Yes.
and neither is true. You are not shamed, and just because you made a mistake or whatever the case may be, that is not your um, identity.
Yes.
So I feel like in order to face your wounds, you have to first of all acknowledge it. And even to acknowledge it, I want to congratulate anyone that will reach the place in their life to acknowledge it. Because let's just be honest, to even bring it up, it kind of rehearse, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. To
It
bring
kind
it
of,
up brings up
it,
some of the old pain of it, and we'd
yeah,
rather avoid that pain, which is why we suppress it and we turn that pain within. Then it shows out in our lives in unproductive ways, like the ways that I illustrated before. Now,
exactly.
what you said about shame and all of that, it's covering your scars, is actually in chapter 5. Stop covering. And I found that to be a very impactful chapter.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Another chapter of your book that I found to be very useful is creating a safe space for the wound.
Hmm.
It creates a safety that enables the wound and the wounded to receive their healing. You want to tell me about what caused you to kind of realize that that was so important?
That is very important, Reverend Jim. But the reason why I say that's important is because many people suffer in silence.
Mm.
We we keep it to ourselves. Depression. I mean, whatever those emotional wounds, emotional baggage, whatever your past wounds may be, we keep
Mhm.
it to ourselves. And it goes back to what I said. We've gotten comfortable. Um, we've gotten really comfortable in the sense that we don't want to open up to anyone. And I would say the ultimate reason why I wrote that chapter, creating a safe space, I like to say safe place also for the wounded, is because where can the wounded really go? They definitely don't need to go, or may I suggest you not to go to someone that's going to be more harmful to you. I've learned, even in the healing process, that some people add to our hurt. They think they're
Mm.
helping. they think that they're helping you when in reality you're adding to my trauma. I don't need that. I need you to help me to minimize it and get the treatment and healing that I so need and also deserve. So I forgot what year it was, but I had went through my divorce. I was very young when I got married the first time. I'm not ashamed to say that I've made some mistakes. I was very immature, didn't know what commitment was, and I don't think I was even really ready for marriage. While all along being in ministry, that's what made it much harder because I had to
Mm,
live up to people's expectations.
mm,
You're a minister, you know, you're supposed to be this way, that way. So I had all that pressure on top of me. And I was
mm,
like, I'm most certainly not going to come out and say I'm going through a divorce because of anything that I've done or she's done.
mhm.
Most churches frown on that.
Right.
So I'll be honest with you. I said, who can I really go to talk about my inner battles and my inner struggles? That was the hardest question, Reverend Jim. I had to ask myself, like, I, I didn't want to go to someone and say, this is how well ministry is going. This is where I spoke at. This is the Bible study I had last week. That's really great, but I wanted to go to someone and say, who can I share information with that only
Mm,
me and God knows about? Because most certainly we won't tell other people, or at least I won't, because I feel like if I'm going to heal, I'm going to do it all in private. Uh,
mm,
I'm going to be prosperous. I'm gonna do it all in private. I want everything to be, and I learned that sometimes exposure is a good thing. Exposure doesn't come to hurt us; it comes to provide restoration
mm,
and healing. So at the time, my pastor, Bill Hackworth, me and him been friends for years. I can't tell you the feeling that I had to be able to sit down with another human being and say, this is what happened. These are my struggles. These are the thoughts I'm having. This is what I'm going through. It was so liberating, especially coming from someone as a pastor,
mhm,
because you would think you would get some judgment. How dare you work on that marriage? It was nothing like that. He showed complete grace and love.
mm,
And when I walked away, I was like, when I walked away from that conversation, I said, I finally let go of the wall. I had a
let go of
wall.
the wall.
I had a wall up, and that wall, I kept that wall up for a reason because the intent of having my wall up was I will never open up to another person. I will never open up to a wife or whoever. And the reason why I wouldn't do it because I didn't want to be hurt again.
Yes.
I didn't want them to add to the pain I've already had. Well, I discovered that that's not true for me. I can keep the wall up, but it's still not going to prevent me from being hurt. Now, I can prevent that by certain choices that I make or maybe people I connect with. But I would
Mhm,
say when I left him, if you remember what we talked about earlier
mhm.
about having keeping it suppressed and not talking about it,
Yes.
not discussing it, that was
Yes.
my house. Nobody came in that house.
Your
But
private house of pain.
exactly. And when I talked to my pastor at that time, that was the first day in my life where I finally opened the door, if you can envision that,
Mm,
allowing somebody into my world of pain and misery and all this stuff I was battling with. And it's
mhm,
so wonderful to be in that space with someone where you can just open up about anything because when you can find that one, it don't gotta be multiple people. If you find just one person,
mm,
just this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm struggling with, and they're hearing you out and their
mhm,
compassion and grace, it actually opens the door and puts you in a position where you want to open up to them about all the things that you may be dealing with.
mm,
It's important to find a safe space, somebody you can just be real with, raw with, authentic. You don't have to cover it up, and also um, someone that you can go to who won't view you differently. Because many of us already feel disgusted by what we've done and what we're dealing with in our own personal lives. So we shouldn't go to people who's, like I said, who's going to add to that.
Mhm.
So I couldn't tell you how I felt just to walk away and say, I mean, I still had to deal with my divorce and all that stuff, but I felt so relieved to know that I didn't have to keep all this in anymore. And as a result, facing my wounds, and it did cause me to prosper in many ways. I would say ultimately mentally, because that's where the major attack was.
Yes.
Thinking I wasn't good enough, thinking I would never develop. Actually, I've tried to do relationships here and there in the past. They didn't work out. So you start to feel inadequate. All these things comes from lack of prosperity. So prosperity is essential in every arena of our lives, especially as it relates to our wounds.
Okay, wonderful. I want to just share a couple of things with our viewers to break down what you said in a way that our viewers can use it for their own benefit. One of the first things you said, if I heard you correctly, create a safe space where the shames and pains that you have felt
Mm-hmm.
can be exposed in order that they may be healed. And that
Yeah.
safe space is a place of unconditional love where you are not judged, where you are seen as you were created as the beloved.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to that space, the walls come tumbling.
Mm-hmm.
All the walls that you have built between you and your world that you thought would keep pain out were actually the walls that kept prosperity out. And
Mm-hmm.
I want us to emphasize that because quite often it happens in love, and it happens in every aspect of life.
Mm-hmm.
Our obsession with avoiding pain causes us to avoid joy, because joy is on the other side of the pain. And if we never address the internal pain, we will never get to the other joy on the other side. So I just wanted to summarize that for our viewers. And I want to ask our viewers, what are some of your safe spaces? And we have a comments section. You can put your questions in the comments section. You can put your recommendations in the comments section for safe spaces that you have found or experienced that enable you to be authentic and to allow yourself to face your wounds and to heal your wounds. And the last thing I want to say about that before we go to break is what it sounds like you did is you unearthed, uncovered, and exposed your pain and shame, and it received the unconditional love of God
Mm-hmm.
to lift it from you so that that which you thought defined you no longer defined you,
Mm-hmm.
and you could allow yourself to be what God created you to be. Is that an accurate assessment of what you're saying?
Yes, sir. It is a perfect. That's perfect.
Well, we had one question so far, and we're going to have some others. So while we go to break, folks, put your questions in the comments section, and we're going to answer some of your questions. We're here on the New Thought Media. And we're back on the New Thought Media Network. And I hope you can hear me and that my mic issues are resolved. We got a number of different comments, and I want to read some of our comments, and then we'll go into questions. Tierney said her safe space is with so many of the earth angels at the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel who listen to her without judgment. And that's a wonderful safe space, if I do say so myself. The mantra of the chapel is that we are a safe space where people experience their spirituality. Zena Dixon. Hi, Zena. Zena Dixon said she has a small group of ladies. They meet twice a month to do life and to discuss issues. And it took her a year to open up. But once she felt safe, she felt it. So thank you, Zena, for that example of how we can create a safe situation for ourselves. And we've had a couple of other comments as well, but we also have a question. And that question is to you, Henry Harris Jr. That question was, what occurred in your life to trigger your healing? What was the trigger that made you realize you needed?
I would say, it was a variety of things. Um, I don't know if it would be one specific thing, but I would say it was a variety of things. I would also like to say that uh, healing, there's a difference between healed and healing.
Mm,
I feel like I'm not saying that you don't reach a place where you are fully healed,
mm,
but you'll discover if you're fully healed when those triggers come back up.
mm.
And you'll start to question, oh, a lot of people go around, I'm healed. I don't have, whatever the case may be. But when those triggers come up, you may find out pretty quick that, oh, maybe I'm not as healed as I thought I was. So I no longer claim that I'm fully healed. Not saying you can't be. I do believe there's some things in my life I'm healed from. But I would say that I think I'm better off today than I was a day ago,
Yes.
or a year ago, or 5 or 10 years ago. So I believe that we can be healed, but also believe that healing is progressive
Yes.
and that we are constantly healing every day from something. I don't know one human being that's not healing from something. And even to start that process, as I said earlier, is challenging, but at least you started. So there are a lot of things, like I said, that I've experienced triggers with as far as emotions and relationships I've been in,
Mm-hmm.
different stuff like that. The the important thing is to be able to identify those emotions and
Mm-hmm.
those triggers and to deal with it in a effective way. And you don't deal with it by pretending like it doesn't exist because it's
Yes.
there. It's there. You have to deal with it. You have to express it, especially if you're in a relationship. I've learned that too. It's important to let your
Yes.
partner know uh,
Mm-hmm.
these are my triggers. This is what gets under my skin, my pet peeve, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yes.
I'm still healing. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I used to be either.
Yeah, so if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that our consciousness is like an onion and healing is in layers. So we're
Exactly.
on this constant journey of healing, and the lion's share of the journey is understanding these are my wounds,
Mm-hmm.
and these are the techniques that I can use to
Yeah.
get back to a sense of peace and wholeness despite these wounds.
Yes,
And
sir.
having counseled and worked with and ministered to and supported people for over 30 years, I can say that as you develop the techniques and tools to address your wounds, the sting or the bite of the wound will get less and less and less. And what I call the recovery time which is the time between the time you were triggered and the time that you were returned back to a sense of peace and stasis, that recovery time gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and the pain of the wound gets less deep, less deep, less deep. And what might have been a devastating wound to you 3 years ago eventually will be a slight annoyance.
Hmm.
And then it will be just an awareness. Oh, I'm aware that I had a fleeting feeling. I'm aware that I had a passing feeling that would have dropped me down into a valley of despair 3 years ago. Now I'm just aware that I had a momentary feeling, and that feeling was healed. So if I hear you correctly, Brother Henry, what you're saying is that healing is a journey.
Yes, it is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't believe you reach a final, if you want to call it a final destination, like, oh, I've arrived. Because I feel like not only does healing comes in layers,
Mm-hmm.
um, but also our wounds come in layers.
Yes.
I'll say it again. I don't think
Yes.
healing comes in layers, but our wounds come in layers. Like once you deal with something that's beneath the surface, and
Yes.
you think you're finally done, I'm good now.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, where did that come up? Where did that
Yeah,
come
I
from?
thought I dealt with that. That's one of my favorite metaphysical sayings. I thought I dealt with that. I thought I
Yeah,
was done with that. I thought I healed this. I addressed this. And then it comes
yeah,
up again.
yeah, and that's why I said earlier. I believe in the and you could be healed like it don't bother you again. That happens. But in my own life, if I were to be honest, I haven't. Is that what Paul said? He hasn't arrived yet. I haven't
Uh,
arrived. I haven't attained it yet. But
mhm.
But like I said, I'm better today than I was yesterday. That's what I normally tell people.
Beautiful.
It's a process,
It's
and
a
I'm
process.
enjoying it. You got to give yourself the grace to heal.
Tell us more about that, Brother Henry. Giving ourselves the grace to heal.
What I mean by giving yourself the grace to heal, you can't be so hard on yourself.
Mm.
And so many people are so hard on themselves. As a human being,
Uh-huh.
you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall. You're not going to always make the right decisions. But the past means exactly that, the past. And you
Mm.
don't have to rehearse it. You don't have to relive it.
Yeah.
You grow, you develop, you mature.
Mhm.
Uh, but just don't stay stuck. And
Yes.
that's what caused me not to experience prosperity as it relates to my wounds. I stayed stuck and I thought this
Yes.
was normal. Like
Mm.
this is normal. It's gonna and never convince yourself that it's always gonna be this way because it's not. No matter
Mm.
what you're experiencing tonight, it's gonna
Mm.
always be this way. Things are not gonna change. Mama dealt with it. Pooh Nanny dealt with it. Never develop that. I talk about that in my book about some of the mentalities that we have as
Yes.
it relates to dealing with wounds. Give yourself the patience and the grace to heal, just as God is patient and gracious with us. And also, secondly, we need to be gracious and patient with other people who may be healing in maybe areas and where you may have evolved in, because I think so many times it can be so easy to not be as patient with someone else. But
Yes.
when we go back and say, "Oh, I was there at one time. God was patient with me. He was loving with me. So maybe I should extend that to this person as well. Not necessarily for them to get to like where I'm at, but to kind of help them along their journey as well. So give yourself the grace to heal. Give yourself a pat on the back. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Thank you. And also pay grace forward. I love
Yeah.
what you said about giving yourself the grace and patience to heal. Uh, this process of emotional healing is so important and so pivotal to our prosperity that I actually dedicated a whole chapter to it in my book,
Hmm.
Soul of Prosperity. And one of the points in that chapter for the 7 step journey of, of healing, emotional healing, was number 3, honor yourself. And I love how you said that. Honor yourself, have the emotion, honor the emotion. And then my third step was honor yourself for having it. Don't beat
Yeah,
yourself up for having that emotion. Having that emotion, understanding that wound, and healing that wound is an integral part of your process of healing. So honor yourself for taking a step forward. And I love what you said in bringing down that wall so that your house of pain can crumble and your house of joy can be stand.
exactly.
Now, we had another question from Carlisa. And this question was, did you find that you were hiding your wounds from the world, that you were hiding from God also?
I believe I believe that God knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I've learned in reference to God is that many people believe that He runs from our mess. In my experience, He dived right into it.
Mm.
Oh, somebody ought to do a praise break.
Somebody out there is doing a happy dance at that one, I can tell you. If I weren't on camera, I'd be doing a happy dance. God is waiting for your mess so you can clear it, and so that the love and light that you are can be remembered, and so that His grace can move into the place in your heart where that mess has existed. God is waiting for your mess. Give it over to God.
Amen. And
Say that. Come
but
on.
he that's my oh, I love it. That's my experience. Like I feel like I didn't hide it from him. If anything, uh he was waiting on me to have him to participate in it.
Yes.
Um the scripture says, cast all your cares upon him, for I care for you. And knowing
Yes.
that he cared for me, I knew that I wouldn't be suffering as much. My spiritual life, with God was a great help too. I can't
Mm.
but at the same time, I can't minimize therapists and people in general who have helped me on my journey as well. Um,
Yes, let's
so
clarify that a little bit, Brother Henry, because there are a couple of things I want to tease out of that a little bit more. Number one, cast all your cares upon Him. Invite God in. When we are in our shame, we have projected that onto God, believing that God is judging us and God is ashamed of us, and we are ashamed of being seen as imperfect by God. God created you, and what we judge to be imperfect is what God created as the lesson you would learn or the blessing you can experience when you realize, wait a minute, only I was judging myself. Of course, in Miracle says
mhm,
God
mhm.
does not. We do a good enough job of condemning ourselves. We do enough of that for us and for God. So cast all your cares on God. Say, God, I let you in. I invite you into this house of pain that you may turn it into. And I want to just put a fine point on that. That is something so profound that you said. I'm
Well, thank you,
so glad you said it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
And God doesn't judge us.
No, no, he does. I think many times we, like you said, we judge ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it depends on people's views of God. Some people have this God as a narcissist and mean spirited and unapproachable. That's not the God that I live for. The one I live for is very inclusive and loving and kind. I'll be honest. I couldn't go to um, it was hard to go to a lot of believers, to be honest, because sometimes you can't share your struggles with people who present an image of themselves that they got it all together.
Yes.
And I talk about that in my book too, about a
Mhm.
guy that was getting ready. You probably read that part. He was getting ready to go fly on a plane, and
Yes.
he asked his assistant, "Well, how long had this pilot?" "Oh, it's his first trip." He said, "Oh, we better get on another flight." And the assistant told him, "Like, well, why?" "Well, I don't mind. I'm not questioning his experience. Maybe he went to airplane school or whatever, but I'm afraid that he may go through some turbulence. He may go through some storms, and he may not know how to navigate his way through it. So I'm not going to trust it." I feel that way too when it comes to opening up to people or not hiding, as the lady said earlier. I want to go through some. I want to relate to some people. Well, that be Kristen or whoever. that can relate with my struggle and not act as if they don't have any.
Hmm. Yes. In other words, you want to see the love and empathy of God reflected to you
Yeah.
in those that you surround yourself with.
Yes,
That
sir.
is what makes you feel safe. Am I hearing you
Yes. Yes, sir.
right?
You are
Exactly.
a
So
great interpreter.
oh, thank you. So what so what Brother Henry is saying is surround yourself with people who understand you, who get you, who embrace you, who know your struggle, who have empathy with you, not people that you are placing on a pedestal to look down on you and to reflect to you the unconscious judgments you have had yourself. Seek
Exactly.
and find love, not judgment, because love heals the wounds that stand between you and spirit.
Oh yeah, and that's so true. And may I add, if you don't mind, you use the word empathy. I believe there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, and when I was going through my wounds, a lot of people express their sympathy. I'm sorry you're going through that. And but empathy came in a way of like empathy says I can relate to this struggle. I've been there. Let me join with you. Let's hold hands on this journey and let's heal together. So without empathy, like I don't think I would have been prosperous at all to open up to those other areas in my life to blossom the way that it did.
Yes. And I want to turn on the other side of the coin I want to turn to the other side of the coin of empathy. Empathy is also paying it forward. When you are empathetic with another,
Hmm.
you are sharing the grace that you have received. You are reflecting the grace that you have received. You are maximizing, optimizing, and magnifying the grace that you receive. So seek empathy for your to support you in healing your wounds, and give empathy to someone who comes to you as wounded. For everybody prospers. God of love is expanded. It's love flowing. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. And you are getting so many kudos, Brother Henry, for being such a wonderful communicator. We're going to go to break right now. And when we come back, we're going to have a few final words, and you're going to share with us some other interesting things about you.
Thank
So we're
you.
going to go to break right now on the New Thought Media Network.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
And we're back here on the New Thought Media Network with Brother Henry Harris, a wonderful communicator and author of the book, Facing Our Wounds, where the basic premise of the book is that our wounds going unattended can be detrimental to our lives and, by definition, our prosperity. So we're so glad to have you, brother. What are you working on these days?
Right now, I don't really have. I'm thinking about writing a second book, but I have to feel it first, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does.
And I have a book in mind called The Sting of Rejection. And like I say, I'm not sure when that'll come out, but it's something that's in my mind. And once I get the push and where I feel like I'll do it. Uh, Other than that, it's just being a single, a father, of course. Uh,
God is absolutely lovely, and I love seeing the depictions of your relationship with your beautiful.
well, thank you, thank you. She's a pain sometimes, but well, I'll keep her around. I told her the other day. I said, 8 more years you're at her, because she's 10. She said,
Yeah.
I'm still going to stay here. I said, well, you can if you want to. So, other than that, working, um, getting ready for the holidays and
Hmm.
things like that. Just being productive, making the people smile.
Yeah.
I feel like uh, I just want to inspire and uplift people. That's my main motive.
And you have done so wonderfully tonight.
Well, thank you.
I'm looking forward to the holidays too, but I've got a couple of more bridges to cross before I can get to the holidays. I'm
That's
working on a
awesome.
couple of things.
That's awesome.
Yes, yes, I'm working on a couple of things, and the audience will see them sooner rather than later. I'm working on a book called Bringing Your Vision Boards to Life, and it'll be out on January 1st, just in time for us to use it to make our New Year's vision boards. And I'm also working on a book called The Alphabet of Prosperity.
Oh
And
wow.
these are bite sized chunks of wisdom and prosperity practices and techniques for maintaining a prosperity consciousness. So you'll see both of these at the end of December, and it'll be a wonderful journey. So I want to thank you, Brother Henry. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I want to thank you for enlightening our audience and fulfilling your divine task as a inspirational speaker, because you have certainly been an inspiration.
Well, thank you too, and once again, thank you for the invitation.
What a pleasure. So we've had Brother Henry Harris, author of Facing Our Wounds, here on the Soul of Prosperity on the New Thought Media Network. Everyone have a wonderful week. Good night.